One Sith Lord demolished every other Sith in the galaxy to save them from themselves. And the craziest part is that it actually worked. For thousands of years, the Sith were their own worst enemy. They spent more time fighting each other than they did battling the Jedi. Every time a Sith master got powerful enough to threaten the Republic, 3 or 4 apprentices would gang up and take him out. Then those apprentices would turn on each other, and the whole cycle would start over again. By 1000 BBY, the Sith were losing badly. The Jedi had nearly wiped them out because while the Jedi worked together, the Sith kept backstabbing each other over who got to be in charge. Lord Scare Khan tried to fix this by creating something called the Brotherhood of Darkness. His big idea was that all Sith would be equals. No more masters lording over apprentices. Everyone would share power and work together to beat the Jedi once and for all. It was a nice thought, but it completely failed. The Sith still hated each other. They still plotted behind closed doors. The only difference was now they had to pretend to get along during meetings. Khan even banned anyone from using the title Darth because he thought it made people too arrogant. That just made the powerful Sith angrier. Enter Darth Bane. He started life as Dismissal, a miner born into poverty on the planet Apatros in 1026 BBY. After getting into trouble with a Republic soldier during a brawl, Dismissal fled off-world and joined the Sith armies of the Brotherhood of Darkness. That's when everything changed for him. The Brotherhood discovered Dismissal had force powers and sent him to their academy on Korriban for training. There, he took the name Bane and quickly became one of the top students in combat and dark side abilities. He was exactly what the Sith needed: powerful, driven, and completely devoted to victory. But the more Bane watched his fellow Sith, the more disgusted he became. He saw weak Sith holding back strong ones. He saw groups of mediocre apprentices teaming up on powerful masters before those masters could pass on their knowledge. The whole system was broken. What really opened Bane's eyes was watching Lord Khan lead the Brotherhood. Khan was supposed to be this great uniter of the Sith, but Bane saw him as a coward. The man was so afraid of being challenged that he tried to make everyone equal. That wasn't strength. That was weakness disguised as wisdom. After a crisis where Bane temporarily lost his connection to the Force, he regained his power but completely lost faith in the Brotherhood's methods. He realized the Sith infighting would never end under this system. There would always be jealousy. There would always be betrayal. The Sith would keep destroying themselves until none were left. So Bane left the war front. While the Brotherhood fought desperately against the Jedi on Ruusan, Bane went searching for answers in ancient Sith knowledge. His journey took him to Lahon, also known as the Unknown World. There, in ruins that had stood for thousands of years, he discovered the holocron of Darth Revan. Revan was a legendary Sith from millennia past who had nearly conquered the Republic. Through Revan's holocron, Bane learned powerful Sith techniques and studied the full history of how the Sith's greed had doomed them time and again. But the most important thing he learned was about something called the Thought Bomb. This ancient ritual could create a sphere of dark side energy so powerful it would destroy every Force-sensitive being in its blast radius. Jedi, Sith, everyone with Force powers would perish instantly. Their very souls would be trapped forever. Most people would see such a weapon as too dangerous to ever use. Bane saw it as the perfect solution to his problem. While studying Revan's teachings, Bane had an epiphany that would change everything. What if there were only two Sith in the entire galaxy? One master to embody all the power of the dark side, and one apprentice to crave that power. No more armies of Sith getting in each other's way. No more weak links dragging everyone down. Just two beings focused entirely on gaining strength and destroying the Jedi. The apprentice would learn everything from the master. When the apprentice grew strong enough, they would challenge the master for control. The winner would continue as the master and find a new apprentice. This way, each generation of Sith would be stronger than the last. The weak would fall, and only the strong would survive to pass on their power. But first, he had to get rid of all the other Sith. Bane returned to the war, pretending to support Lord Khan while secretly working against him. The Brotherhood was losing battle after battle on Ruusan. Lord Hoth's army of light kept pushing them back. Morale was collapsing. Khan was getting desperate. This was exactly what Bane had been waiting for. He started feeding Khan information about the thought bomb through intermediaries. He made it seem like ancient Sith knowledge that had just been rediscovered. He played on Khan's desperation and fear of defeat, convincing him this ultimate weapon was the only way to turn the war around. Khan took the bait. He became obsessed with the thought bomb as the Brotherhood's salvation. What he didn't realize was that Bane had carefully orchestrated everything. Bane knew the thought bomb would destroy whoever used it along with their enemies. He knew Khan's pride would make him gather all the Sith Lords together for the ritual. He knew the Jedi would pursue them into whatever trap they set. And most importantly, Bane made absolutely sure he would be somewhere else when it happened. The 7th Battle of Ruusan was shaping up to be the Brotherhood's final defeat. Lord Hoth's Jedi had them surrounded. Every escape route was blocked. The Sith forces were exhausted from months of constant fighting and retreat. Lord Khan gathered his remaining Sith Lords for what he said would be their moment of triumph. Down in the natural cave systems beneath the battlefield, away from the fighting above, he revealed his plan. They would use the thought bomb to destroy the Jedi army in one stroke. Some of the Sith Lords immediately understood what this meant. The thought bomb would destroy them too. There were arguments, shouts of protest, accusations of madness. But Khan had made up his mind. If the Brotherhood was going to fall, he declared, they would take the Jedi with them. Better to perish as legends than surrender as failures. In the largest cavern, deep underground, the Sith Lords formed their circle. Nearly every surviving member of the Brotherhood was there. They began channeling their dark side energy together, following the ritual Khan had learned. The cave walls started to crack from the pressure. The ground shook. Even far above on the surface, both armies could feel something terrible building below. Lord Hoth sensed the danger and led nearly 100 Jedi in pursuit of the Sith. They descended into the caves, following the trail of dark side energy. They were getting close when the thought bomb detonated. The explosion was pure force energy turned into annihilation. Every force-sensitive being within the cave system simply ceased to exist. Their bodies fell, but their spirits became trapped in an endless void of torment. The Brotherhood of Darkness, Lord Khan, all the Sith Lords who had joined the ritual were gone in an instant. Lord Hoth and his pursuing Jedi met the exact same fate. The detonation left a wound in the Force itself that would linger for centuries. Above ground, the battle stopped immediately. Both armies felt the devastating psychic shockwave. Hundreds of Force users had just been erased from existence. The remaining Jedi were stunned. The few Sith soldiers still alive scattered in terror. Hours later, Darth Bane arrived at the battlefield. He walked through caves littered with empty robes and abandoned lightsabers. He could hear the echo of trapped souls that only a Force user could sense. Everything had gone exactly according to his plan. The Republic forces that arrived days later found what looked like total victory. The Sith army was destroyed. The Brotherhood's leadership was gone. As far as anyone could tell, the Sith had destroyed themselves in one final act of spite. The 1,000-year war between Jedi and Sith was finally over. The celebrations were immediate. The Republic Senate passed the Ruusan Reformations, disbanding most of the military and declaring a new age of peace. The Jedi Order restructured itself, moving away from their role as generals to become peacekeepers and negotiators. History books recorded this as the extinction of the Sith. They were completely wrong. Bane still lived, and he wasn't alone for long. While searching the battlefield's ruins, Bane discovered a young girl named Rain. She had been traveling with the Jedi but survived the destruction by tapping into the dark side. When her friend fell during the battle, Rain's grief and rage awakened her Force powers violently. She had survived where trained Jedi had not. Bane found her days later, still hiding in the wreckage. Where others would see a traumatized child, Bane saw incredible potential. Her connection to the Force was naturally strong, and she had already touched the dark side without being consumed by it. He offered her a choice. Come with him and learn to control her power, or stay and eventually be found by Jedi who would never understand what she had become. Rain chose to follow him. From that moment, Rain ceased to exist. Bane gave her a new name befitting a Sith, Darth Zana. He reclaimed the title of Darth that Khan had banned, wearing it as a mark of true Sith power, and bestowed it upon his apprentice as well. Now there were exactly 2 Sith in the galaxy, one master, one apprentice. The rule of 2 was born. Bane explained his vision to Zana as they left Ruusan behind. The Sith would never again gather in armies or build obvious strongholds. They would work from the shadows, taking false identities, building influence slowly over generations. Each master would pour all their knowledge into one apprentice. When that apprentice grew strong enough, they would challenge their master. The victor would become the new master and find their own apprentice. They would be patient. If revenge took 1,000 years, so be it. The Sith would infiltrate the Republic's institutions, corrupt its leaders, and weaken it from within. When the time was finally right, they would strike from the shadows and destroy the Jedi forever. The galaxy moved forward, convinced the ancient threat was gone. The Jedi returned to their temples. The Republic enjoyed peace and prosperity. Nobody suspected that 2 Sith walked among them, hidden in plain sight, planning revenge that would unfold across centuries. Darth Bane had destroyed the old Sith to save them from themselves. Now he and Darth Zana would build something far more dangerous. Not an army that could be defeated in battle, but a secret that would grow in darkness until it was ready to swallow the light. The hardest part about being the only 2 Sith in the galaxy was staying that way. Darth Bane and Darth Zana had to completely reinvent how the Sith operated, turning from an army into a secret. Their relationship was unlike anything the Sith had seen before. Bane poured all his knowledge into Zannah, teaching her everything about the dark side, combat techniques, and ancient Sith lore. But this wasn't some caring mentorship. Every lesson came with the understanding that one day Zannah would use this knowledge to challenge him. She would have to prove she was stronger by defeating him, or she would perish trying. This created a strange dynamic between them. Bane watched Zannah constantly for signs she might be ready to strike. Zannah knew she had to be patient and wait for the perfect moment, because she would only get one chance. If she moved too early and failed, Bane would end her and find another apprentice. Move too late, and Bane might decide she was too weak and replace her anyway. For years, they moved through the galaxy like ghosts. They took on false identities, blending into regular society. Sometimes they posed as merchants or scholars. Other times, they simply disappeared into the vast wilderness of remote planets. The key was never staying in one place long enough for anyone to notice something unusual about them. The Jedi thought the Sith were gone, but they still investigated strange occurrences. Any hint of dark side activity would bring Jedi investigators. Bane and Zannah had to be incredibly careful about using their powers. One mistake could expose them and bring the entire Jedi Order down on their heads. About a decade after Ruusan, that almost happened. In 990 BBY, rumors started spreading about possible Sith survivors. The Jedi Council couldn't ignore these whispers, especially when they pointed to specific sightings. A team of Jedi tracked Bane and Zannah to the planet Tython, a world strong in the Force that had been important to both Jedi and Sith throughout history. The confrontation that followed nearly ended the Rule of Two before it could truly begin. Bane had been dealing with creatures called obelisks that had attached themselves to his body. These parasites formed living armor that made him incredibly powerful, but also slowly poisoned him. During the battle with the Jedi strike team, the obelisks became both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. The fight was brutal. Despite being outnumbered, Bane and Zannah managed to defeat the entire Jedi team. But Bane was severely injured, partly from the battle itself, and partly from the obelisk's toxic effects when they were damaged. They needed to escape before Jedi reinforcements arrived. This is where Zannah proved her cunning. She had a cousin named Daravit who had once been a Jedi, but lost his way after Ruusan. Zannah used Sith sorcery on him, affecting his mind and leaving him behind at the scene. When the Jedi reinforcements showed up, they found Daravit acting erratically, surrounded by the fallen Jedi. In their haste, they assumed he was the Sith Lord they were hunting and ended his life. The deception worked perfectly. The Jedi Order received reports that the surviving Sith had been found and eliminated. The threat was over. The galaxy was safe. Case closed. Bane and Zannah vanished back into the shadows while the Jedi congratulated themselves on ending the Sith once and for all. After recovering from his injuries, Bane realized they had been lucky. Too lucky. If both he and Zannah perished unexpectedly, all the Sith knowledge would be lost forever. The Rule of Two was strong, but it was also fragile. Two Sith could hide better than an army, but two Sith could also be wiped out in a single bad day. Around 980 BBY, Bane started working on a solution. He began searching for the secrets of creating a holocron, one of those ancient devices that could store knowledge and even a piece of someone's consciousness. The Jedi had their own holocrons, but Sith holocrons were different. They didn't just store information. They stored the very essence of their creator's dark power. Bane traveled to worlds like Tython and Ambria, gathering ancient secrets. He found the holocron of Belia Darzu, an old Sith who had mastered the art of creating these devices. Through painstaking study and experimentation, Bane successfully created his own holocron. Into it, he poured the knowledge of the Rule of Two, the grand plan for destroying the Jedi, and all his dark side teachings. This holocron would ensure that even if something happened to both Sith, their knowledge could survive. A future Darksider might find it and restart the Rule of Two. The grand plan could continue even if the current Sith line ended. But as years passed, a new concern began eating at Bane. He was getting older while Zannah was entering her prime. That was natural and expected. The problem was that Zannah didn't seem eager to challenge him. She appeared content to remain the apprentice, learning and growing stronger, but never making her move. This worried Bane deeply. The whole point of the Rule of Two was that the apprentice would eventually grow strong enough to overthrow the master. If Zannah was too weak or too afraid to challenge him, the system would fail. The Sith would stagnate instead of growing stronger with each generation. Fearing he might have chosen the wrong apprentice, Bane began researching ways to extend his life. He learned about an ancient Sith technique called essence transfer. This dark ritual would allow someone to move their consciousness into another person's body, essentially stealing that body and living on through it. In 980 BBY, Bane tracked down the holocron of Darth Andedu on the planet Prakeeth. Andedu had been an ancient Sith Lord who supposedly mastered the art of cheating death through essence transfer. The holocron contained the instructions for this forbidden technique. Armed with this knowledge, Bane started considering a terrible possibility. If Zannah wouldn't challenge him properly, maybe he could possess her body instead. He would continue living in her form, maintaining all his knowledge and power while gaining her younger, stronger physical vessel. It would break the Rule of Two's intended cycle. But at least the Sith would survive with a strong leader. Finally, Zannah realized what her master was planning. She understood that her time of waiting was over. Either she challenged Bane now, or she might lose her chance forever. The final confrontation between master and apprentice took place on Ambria in 980 BBY. The duel was everything the Rule of Two demanded. Bane was past his physical prime, but still enormously powerful and experienced. Zannah had become a formidable Sith sorceress, specializing in techniques that attacked the mind rather than the body. They fought with lightsabers and force powers, each trying to prove they were the stronger Sith. As Zannah gained the upper hand, Bane made his desperate gambit. He attempted the essence transfer ritual, trying to seize control of Zannah's body and continue living through her. For a moment, the outcome was uncertain. Their spirits battled on a level beyond the physical. When it was over, Zannah stood victorious. She had resisted Bane's attempt to possess her and destroyed his consciousness. Though some would later notice her hand occasionally twitching in a way that reminded them of Bane's mannerisms, suggesting perhaps a fragment of him remained. Zannah was firmly in control. Darth Bane was gone. Darth Zannah was now the Dark Lord of the Sith. The Rule of Two had completed its first full cycle. The apprentice had proven herself by defeating the master, ensuring that the Sith grew stronger rather than weaker. Everything had worked exactly as Bane had originally designed, even if he hadn't planned on being the first master to fall. With Darth Bane gone, Darth Zana stood alone as the Dark Lord of the Sith. She had proven herself by defeating her master, just as the rule of two demanded. Now came the hard part. She had to continue Bane's grand design while the entire galaxy believed the Sith were extinct. Zana understood the weight on her shoulders. She wasn't just carrying her own ambitions. She was carrying 1,000 years of Sith knowledge and Bane's dream of eventual revenge against the Jedi. One mistake could end everything. One slip could expose the Sith and bring the entire Jedi Order crashing down on her before the plan was ready. The Jedi had no idea she existed. As far as they knew, the last Sith had perished on Tython years ago when they found Daravit. Their ancient enemies were finally gone. Nothing more than a cautionary tale for younglings. This blindness was Zana's greatest weapon. She could move freely through the galaxy, building the Sith's power base while the Jedi relaxed in their temples. But Zana knew she couldn't do it alone. The rule of two required an apprentice, someone to carry on if she fell and eventually challenge her for leadership. She needed someone strong, cunning, and completely dedicated to the dark side. She found her candidate in an Iktochi assassin known as the Huntress. This woman had actually helped Zana track down Bane before their final duel, proving both her skills and her ambition. The Huntress was already a formidable warrior who had touched the dark side through her work. She understood power and wasn't afraid to take what she wanted. Zana approached the Huntress with an offer. Become my apprentice, learn the true power of the dark side, and one day inherit the entire Sith legacy. The Huntress accepted immediately. From that moment, she ceased to be a mere assassin. Zana gave her the name Darth Cognos, marking her as a true Sith in the line of Bane. The training began immediately. Zana passed on everything Bane had taught her, plus her own discoveries about Sith sorcery and mind manipulation. Cognos proved to be an eager student, absorbing the lessons quickly. She had a natural talent for seeing possible futures through the Force, which made her particularly valuable for planning long-term strategies. For years, Master and apprentice worked together in perfect secrecy. They continued Bane's grand plan, slowly infiltrating galactic institutions, corrupting officials, and weakening the Republic from within. Every move was calculated. Every action was designed to bring them closer to the day when the Sith could reveal themselves and destroy the Jedi. Eventually, Cognos grew strong enough to challenge Zana. The details of their final confrontation have been lost to history, but we know the outcome. Cognos emerged victorious, becoming the new Dark Lord of the Sith. The rule of two had successfully passed through another generation, with each transfer making the Sith stronger. As the new master, Cognos needed her own apprentice. She found a peculiar candidate. A mutant human with 3 eyes who possessed an incredible talent for prophecy. She named him Darth Millennial and began his training in the ways of the Sith. But Millennial was different from previous Sith. His 3rd eye gave him unique insights into the Force, but it also made him question everything. The more he learned about the rule of two, the less sense it made to him. Why should the Sith limit themselves to just 2 members? Why not return to the old ways of having multiple Sith with the strongest ruling over the rest? Millennial started expressing these doubts to Cognos. He argued that Bane's system was too restrictive, too vulnerable. What if both Sith perished in an accident? What if the Jedi discovered them? Having only 2 Sith was putting all their eggs in one basket. He preferred Lord Khan's vision of multiple Sith working together, even if it hadn't worked out perfectly the first time. Cognis was horrified by her apprentice's heresy. She was a true believer in Bane's vision. The rule of 2 had been working perfectly for generations. It had kept the Sith hidden while making them stronger with each passing. Millennials' ideas weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. They threatened to undo everything Bane had built. The arguments between master and apprentice grew more heated. Millennial kept pushing for change while Cognis demanded obedience to tradition. Their philosophical differences became impossible to bridge. Something had to give. But instead of challenging Cognis for leadership as the rule of 2 demanded, Millennial made a different choice. Around 800 BBY, he simply walked away. He abandoned his master, abandoned the Sith Order, and went into self-imposed exile. Millennial fled to Dromund Kaas, a remote planet drenched in dark side energy. There, free from Cognis and the rule of 2, he started his own movement. He called it the Dark Force Religion, though it would later become known as the Prophets of the Dark Side. This new cult embraced everything the rule of 2 rejected. Millennial gathered followers from across the galaxy, teaching them dark side techniques without the restrictions of Sith tradition. Multiple members could exist at once. They focused heavily on prophecy and seeing the future. It was basically Millennial's attempt to create his own version of what the Sith should be. Back with the true Sith, Cognis faced a dilemma. Her apprentice had abandoned her, leaving her without a successor. The rule of 2 was broken, not through combat, but through desertion. She needed to act quickly to preserve Bane's lineage. Cognis found another apprentice to replace Millennial. We don't know this new apprentice's name, but they proved more loyal to the rule of 2. The main Sith line continued unbroken, though Millennial's defection had created the first splinter group since Bane's reformation. The centuries that followed were marked by extreme secrecy. Zana, Cognis, and their successors operated with incredible caution. They took false identities, hid their Force abilities, and never stayed in one place too long. Each master faithfully passed the grand plan to their apprentice, usually through direct training and holocrons that preserved crucial knowledge. The Sith became phantoms, influencing galactic events without anyone knowing they existed. They might pose as wealthy merchants, influential advisors, or crime lords. They pulled strings from the shadows, always working toward their ultimate goal of revenge against the Jedi and domination of the galaxy. Their secrecy was so complete that even when evidence surfaced, nobody believed it. In 181 BBY, something remarkable happened that showed just how blind the Jedi had become. A Jedi Padawan named Kib Jeen fell to the dark side and went mad. As he was dying, he ranted about the Sith still being alive. He specifically mentioned a rule of 2, describing how the Sith operated with one master and one apprentice. The Jedi Council heard these claims and dismissed them completely. They decided Kib Jeen was just insane, his mind broken by the dark side. The idea that the Sith could have survived Ruusan and stayed hidden for 800 years seemed impossible. It was easier to believe the ravings of a madman than accept they had been fooled for centuries. This dismissal was exactly what the Sith needed. If the Jedi had taken Kib Jeen seriously and investigated, they might have uncovered the truth. Instead, they remained complacent, secure in their false belief that their ancient enemies were gone forever. Through all these centuries, through multiple generations of masters and apprentices, the rule of two endured. Each Sith added their own knowledge to the tradition while maintaining Bane's core vision. They were patient, knowing their revenge might take 1,000 years. They were careful, understanding that one mistake could ruin everything. And they were determined, believing absolutely that one day the Sith would rule the galaxy. Millennials, prophets of the dark side, continued to exist on Dromund Kaas, a reminder that not everyone agreed with Bane's vision. But while this splinter group played with prophecy and gathered followers, the true Sith continued their patient work. They weren't interested in building cults or making grand gestures. They were playing a longer, deadlier game. The rule of two had survived its first ideological challenge. Millennials' defection could have destroyed everything, but the Sith adapted and continued. As the centuries passed and the Republic grew complacent, the Sith grew stronger. Each generation brought them closer to their ultimate goal. The Jedi had no idea what was coming. For 800 years after Darth Bane's reformation, the Sith became the galaxy's best-kept secret. Generation after generation of masters and apprentices lived and passed on without anyone knowing they existed. According to Darth Plagueis, who would come much later, there were only about 30 Sith total during this entire millennium. Think about that. 30 people carrying the weight of an entire tradition across 1,000 years. At any given moment, there were just two. One master, one apprentice, hiding in a galaxy of trillions. These Sith Lords, whose names are mostly lost to history, perfected the art of deception. They took on completely different identities in their public lives. Some became wealthy merchants who used their fortunes to influence trade routes and economic policies. Others posed as crime lords, controlling the underworld while the Jedi focused on more obvious threats. A few even worked as advisors to politicians, whispering suggestions that slowly corrupted the Republic from within. The key was patience. These Sith weren't interested in quick victories or dramatic gestures. They played a game measured in centuries, making moves so subtle that nobody noticed the pattern. They would fund a political campaign here, start a trade dispute there, always pushing the Republic toward instability without anyone realizing there was a guiding hand behind it all. Each master trained their apprentice not just in combat and force techniques, but in this grand strategy of patience. The apprentice had to understand they might never see the final victory. They might spend their entire life preparing the way for future generations. It took a special kind of dedication to work toward a goal you would never live to see completed. But around 533 BBY, this careful system nearly collapsed because of one man's crisis of faith. Darth Gravid was a human who became the Sith Master about 5 centuries before the Republic would eventually fall. At first, he seemed like any other Sith Lord, training his apprentice and continuing the grand plan. But something started to change in him. The more he studied the dark side, the more he began to question if the Sith were on the right path. He decided that pure devotion to the dark side would eventually doom the Sith. The darkness would consume them from within, leaving nothing but destruction. In his increasingly unstable mind, he thought the solution was to blend Sith teachings with Jedi philosophy, light and dark together, creating some kind of balance. This wasn't just heresy. It was complete madness according to everything Bane had established. The whole point of the Rule of Two was to concentrate dark side power, not dilute it with Jedi nonsense. But Gravid had lost his grip on reality. He genuinely believed he was saving the Sith by destroying what made them Sith. Gravid went on a rampage through the Sith archives. He burned holocrons that had been carefully preserved for centuries. He destroyed artifacts that contained irreplaceable dark side knowledge. He shattered tablets with ancient Sith writings. Years of accumulated wisdom went up in flames as Gravid tried to purge what he saw as excessive darkness. Some of the most important Sith secrets were lost in Gravid's purge. Techniques like essence transfer, which Bane had learned near the end of his life, vanished from Sith knowledge. Battle techniques perfected over generations disappeared. Historical records that traced the Sith lineage back thousands of years turned to ash. Gravid's apprentice, a woman named Darth Bane, watched in horror as her master destroyed their heritage. She tried to reason with him at first, but it became clear that Gravid was beyond reasoning. He wasn't just destroying objects, he was destroying the Sith Order itself. Bane had no choice but to confront her master before he could finish his destructive work. The battle between them was as much philosophical as physical. Gravid fought with his strange mix of light and dark techniques, while Bane used pure Sith fury. In the end, Bane emerged victorious, ending Gravid's life before he could destroy everything. But the damage was already done. Gravid had managed to destroy centuries' worth of accumulated Sith knowledge. The Order that had been growing stronger with each generation suddenly found itself crippled. Secrets that had been passed down from Bane himself were gone forever. This single event set the Sith back by hundreds of years. The grand plan had to be delayed while they rebuilt their knowledge base from whatever scraps Gravid had missed. Darth Bane and her successors had to become archaeologists as much as Sith Lords, searching the galaxy for lost artifacts and trying to piece together what had been destroyed. The Sith became even more cautious after Gravid's betrayal. They realized that the greatest threat to their order might come from within. Each master watched their apprentice carefully for signs of instability. Each apprentice wondered if their master might suddenly turn destructive like Gravid had. They also started distributing their knowledge more carefully. Instead of keeping everything in one place where a single traitor could destroy it all, they hid holocrons and artifacts across multiple worlds. They created backup copies of essential teachings. They made sure that even if another Gravid appeared, he couldn't destroy everything. Slowly, painfully, the Sith rebuilt. By around 400 BBY, they had recovered much of their strength, though some secrets remained lost forever. New Sith Lords had to rediscover techniques through trial and error that previous generations had known as basic teachings. But they persevered, driven by their hunger for revenge against the Jedi. During these centuries, the Sith's existence occasionally surfaced in rumors and whispers. There might be reports of someone using dark side powers in the Outer Rim. A politician might suddenly become corrupted in ways that suggested dark influence. But these incidents were always isolated, always deniable. The Jedi investigated when they heard such rumors, but they never found anything concrete. The closest call came with that Padawan Keeb Jin in 181 BBY. When he fell to the dark side and started ranting about the Sith following a rule of two, he was speaking the absolute truth. But the Jedi Council couldn't accept it. The idea that the Sith had survived for 800 years without detection seemed impossible. It was easier to dismiss Gene as insane than to consider that the Jedi had been fooled for so long. This arrogance was exactly what the Sith counted on. The Jedi were so confident in their victory at Ruusan that they couldn't imagine the Sith adapting and surviving. Every time evidence appeared, they found ways to explain it away. The Sith used the Jedi's certainty as a shield, hiding behind their enemies' inability to believe the truth. As the centuries passed, the Republic itself began to show signs of the Sith's hidden influence. Corruption spread through the Senate. Corporate interests gained more power than they should have. Systems on the Outer Rim felt abandoned by the core worlds. None of these problems seemed connected, but they all served the Sith's purpose of weakening the Republic's foundations. By the time Darth Tenebros emerged as the Sith Master around 200 to 100 BBY, the grand plan was entering its final stages. Tenebros was a Bith, a species known for their intelligence and mathematical precision. In his public life, he was a respected starship engineer and mathematician. Nobody suspected that this brilliant scientist was actually a Dark Lord of the Sith. Under Tenebros, the Sith infiltration reached new heights. They had their fingers in galactic finance, controlling banks and trade organizations. They had connections throughout the political sphere, influencing policy without anyone realizing it. The pieces were almost all in place for the Sith's final victory. Tenebros believed he would see the end of the rule of two in his lifetime. Not because it would fail, but because it would succeed. Once the Jedi were destroyed and the Sith ruled openly, there would be no need to limit themselves to two. He even started to imagine modifications to Bane's system that might work better in a post-victory galaxy. But tradition demanded that he still train an apprentice. Tenebros needed someone who could help execute the final stages of the plan and potentially carry it forward if something happened to him. He chose his apprentice carefully, selecting someone who would become pivotal to the entire Sith endgame. The 1,000-year wait was almost over. The Sith had survived betrayal from within, near discovery by the Jedi, and centuries of patient hiding. They had rebuilt from Gravid's destruction and emerged stronger than ever. The rule of two had proven itself, keeping the Sith focused and powerful while their enemies grew complacent. The galaxy had no idea that its fate was being decided by two beings hiding in the shadows, heirs to a tradition that supposedly ended at Ruusan. The greatest trick the Sith ever pulled was convincing the galaxy they didn't exist. And that trick was about to pay off in ways the Jedi couldn't imagine. Darth Tenebros wasn't your typical Sith Lord. Born as Rugus Gnome, he was a Bith, one of those large-headed aliens known for their incredible intelligence and mathematical abilities. While other Sith relied on passion and fury, Tenebros treated the dark side like a science experiment. He could calculate probabilities, predict outcomes, and plan moves decades in advance with frightening precision. In his public life, Tenebros was a respected starship engineer and mathematician. He designed hyperdrives, wrote theoretical papers, and attended scientific conferences. Nobody at those gatherings suspected that the brilliant scientist explaining quantum mechanics was actually plotting the downfall of galactic civilization. Tenebros saw the big picture better than any Sith before him. He could see the cracks forming in the Republic's foundation. The Senate was becoming more corrupt each year. Corporations were gaining power over entire star systems. The Jedi were growing arrogant and disconnected from regular people. Everything was perfectly positioned for the Sith to make their move. What made Tenebrous unusual was his attitude toward the rule of two itself. He respected what Bane had created, but he thought of it more as a tool than a sacred law. The rule had served its purpose by keeping the Sith hidden and strong for nearly 1,000 years. But Tenebrous believed that once the Jedi were defeated, the rule of two could be retired like an old starship that had outlived its usefulness. When it came time to choose an apprentice, Tenebrous selected someone who could match his intelligence while bringing different skills to the partnership. He found his candidate in a moon, one of those tall, thin beings with elongated heads who basically ran the galactic banking system. This moon took the Sith name Darth Plagueis, though the galaxy knew him as Hego Damask, a wealthy banking magnate. Where Tenebrous understood science and engineering, Plagueis understood money and power. As head of Damask Holdings, he controlled vast financial networks that touched every corner of the Republic. He could crash economies with a few transactions or fund entire wars without anyone tracing the money back to him. Together, Tenebrous and Plagueis formed perhaps the most intellectually powerful Sith pairing in history. Tenebrous taught Plagueis how to see the patterns in galactic events, how to calculate the perfect moment to strike. In return, Plagueis showed his master how money could be weaponized, how financial pressure could topple governments more effectively than any army. But Plagueis had his own obsessions that went beyond the grand plan. He became fascinated with the deepest mysteries of the Force, particularly the relationship between the Force and life itself. He studied midi-chlorians, those microscopic organisms that allowed beings to touch the Force. He wondered if someone could manipulate midi-chlorians to extend life, prevent aging, or even create life from nothing. This obsession with immortality would define Plagueis's approach to everything. He conducted countless experiments, pushing the boundaries of what the dark side could accomplish. He learned to influence midi-chlorians, to heal wounds that should have been fatal. Some said he could even prevent others from passing away, though he kept these abilities secret from all but his most trusted allies. Plagueis had a radical vision for the future of the Sith. He imagined a scenario where both master and apprentice could live forever, ruling side by side for eternity. No more betrayals, no more cycles of apprentices overthrowing masters. Just two immortal Sith Lords governing the galaxy forever. It was a complete reimagining of what Bane had intended, though Plagueis was careful to keep these thoughts private. But Tenebrous had his own secrets. Despite the rule of two, he had quietly trained a second apprentice behind Plagueis's back. This secret student was another Bith named Darth Venomous. Why would Tenebrous break the very rule he was supposed to uphold? Maybe he wanted insurance in case Plagueis proved unsuitable. Maybe he enjoyed the competition between students. Or maybe, as he approached the end of the grand plan, he simply thought the old rules didn't matter anymore. This deception would have massive consequences. In 67 BBY, the rule of two played out as it always had. Plagueis finally decided his master had taught him everything useful, and their confrontation ended with Tenebrous falling and Plagueis ascending as the new Dark Lord of the Sith. It seemed like a normal transition of power, exactly as Bane had designed. But then Plagueis discovered his master's betrayal. He learned about Darth Venomous, this secret apprentice who challenged the very foundation of the rule of two. Plagueis hunted down Venomous and confronted him in combat. The battle was swift and decisive. Plagueis proved why he, not Venomous, had been the true apprentice. With Venomous defeated, Plagueis restored the rule of two, erasing his master's violation of Bane's doctrine. Now alone as the Dark Lord, Plagueis needed his own apprentice to continue the rule of two. He searched carefully for someone special, someone who could help complete the grand plan that was so close to fruition. He found his candidate in an unlikely place, the peaceful planet of Naboo. Palpatine was young nobility from Naboo, born into privilege but hungry for something more. He had political ambitions that went far beyond what his family expected. More importantly, he had a darkness inside him that most people never noticed. Behind his charming smile and diplomatic words was a mind that thought constantly about power and control. Plagueis orchestrated several encounters with Palpatine around 65 BBY, slowly evaluating the young man's potential. He saw in Palpatine not just force sensitivity, but a natural understanding of manipulation and deception. This wasn't someone who needed to be taught how to lie and scheme. It came as naturally to him as breathing. The process of recruiting Palpatine was gradual and careful. Plagueis posed as a wealthy patron interested in supporting Palpatine's political career. He offered advice, opened doors, and slowly introduced ideas about power and control. All the while, he was nurturing the darkness that already existed in Palpatine's heart. The final test came when Palpatine had to prove his commitment to the dark side. The details remain murky, but it involved Palpatine turning against his own family in a decisive way. Whatever happened, it proved to Plagueis that Palpatine was ready to abandon everything for power. From that moment, Palpatine ceased to exist in private. He became Darth Sidious, apprentice to Darth Plagueis. This was a watershed moment for the Sith. For the first time in their 1,000-year history following the rule of two, they had an apprentice who was directly involved in Republic politics. Sidious wasn't hiding as a crime lord or merchant. He was climbing the political ladder on Naboo, positioning himself to one day enter the Galactic Senate. Plagueis and Sidious made a formidable team. Plagueis controlled the financial systems while Sidious worked the political angles. They coordinated their efforts, using economic pressure to influence elections and political maneuvering to protect their financial interests. It was a two-pronged attack on the Republic's stability, and nobody realized it was happening. As master and apprentice, they shared the vision of the grand plan finally coming to fruition. Plagueis talked about them ruling together eternally, having conquered aging through his midi-chlorian experiments. Sidious nodded and agreed, though whether he truly believed in this vision or was simply telling his master what he wanted to hear remained his secret. The Sith were closer to victory than they had ever been. They had their fingers on the Republic's economic and political pulse. They had the patience of 1,000 years of preparation. They had the knowledge accumulated by 30 generations of Sith Lords. Everything was falling into place. Plagueis later reflected that in the millennium since Bane, there had been only about 30 Sith total. 30 beings who had carried this enormous secret, this grand conspiracy, across the centuries. Now he and Sidious stood ready to be the ones who would finally reveal the Sith to the galaxy and claim their revenge. The rule of two had brought them this far. Whether it would survive their victory was a question for another day. For now, master and apprentice worked together, each harboring their own vision of what the future would hold once the Jedi were gone and the Sith ruled supreme. The partnership between Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious would become the most successful Sith collaboration in history. For over 30 years, from roughly 65 to 32 BBY, master and apprentice worked together to position themselves for the final strike against the Republic and the Jedi. Plagueis approached Sidious's training differently than previous Sith masters. He didn't just teach combat techniques and force powers. He treated Sidious almost like a business partner, sharing every aspect of the grand plan and explaining the reasoning behind each move. They would spend hours discussing political theory, economic manipulation, and the psychology of power. Under Plagueis's guidance, Sidious climbed through Naboo's political ranks with calculated precision. First, he became a local administrator, then a regional governor. Eventually, he positioned himself to become Naboo's senator to the Republic. Each step was carefully planned, with Plagueis pulling strings behind the scenes to eliminate rivals and create opportunities. The two Sith divided their responsibilities perfectly. Plagueis handled the financial side, using his banking empire to fund political campaigns, bribe officials, and create economic crises that pushed systems toward desperation. Sidious worked the political angle, building alliances, identifying corrupt politicians who could be useful, and slowly spreading his influence through the Senate. Together, they corrupted the Republic from within like a disease. They would identify an honest senator and gradually surround them with corrupt advisors. They would take a stable star system and create trade disputes that turned neighbors into enemies. Every move was calculated to weaken the Republic's foundations while maintaining the appearance of normal political friction. Plagueis continued his experiments with immortality throughout this period. He genuinely believed he had found the secret to eternal life through manipulating midichlorians. In his mind, the rule of two was about to evolve into something new. Instead of master and apprentice, there would be two eternal Sith masters ruling forever. No more betrayals, no more succession, just permanent Sith dominance. He shared these visions with Sidious, explaining how they would rule side by side for millennia. Sidious appeared to embrace this future, nodding along as Plagueis described their eternal partnership. But behind his eager expression, Sidious had very different plans. While supposedly serving as the loyal apprentice, Sidious was secretly building his own power base. The most significant example of this was Darth Maul, a Dathomirian Zabrak whom Sidious had taken as a child and trained in secret. Maul was raised to be a weapon, taught to hate the Jedi with every fiber of his being, and molded into the perfect Sith assassin. This was technically a violation of the rule of two. There should only be two Sith, but here was Sidious training what looked like a third. When Plagueis eventually discovered Maul's existence, Sidious was ready with an explanation. Maul wasn't really a Sith, he argued. He was just a tool, an assassin who happened to use the dark side. He would never be taught the deeper mysteries or be considered for succession. He was disposable. Plagueis accepted this reasoning, partly because he himself was planning to bend the rule of two with his immortality scheme. If the rule could be adjusted to allow two permanent masters, why not allow for disposable servants? Besides, Maul could be useful for tasks that were beneath true Sith lords. This arrangement showed just how far the Sith had evolved from Bane's original vision. The rule of two was becoming more of a guideline than an absolute law. Both master and apprentice were finding ways to work around it while claiming to honor its spirit. By 32 BBY, everything was in position for the final phase of the grand plan. Plagueis and Sidious orchestrated a crisis on Naboo, Sidious's home planet. They manipulated the Trade Federation into blockading and then invading the peaceful world. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Sidious, as Senator Palpatine, would heroically oppose the invasion of his own homeworld. The current Supreme Chancellor would appear weak and ineffective, and Palpatine would reluctantly accept a nomination to replace him. The plan worked perfectly. The Senate, frustrated by Chancellor Valorum's inability to handle the crisis, called for a vote of no confidence. Palpatine was nominated as a replacement, positioning himself as a political outsider who would bring change to the corrupt system. The sympathy vote for embattled Naboo pushed him over the edge. Senator Palpatine became Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. This was the moment the Sith had been working toward for 1,000 years. A Dark Lord of the Sith now held the highest office in the Galactic Republic. From this position, Sidious could manipulate everything. He controlled judicial appointments, military decisions, and the very laws that governed trillions of beings. Plagueis was ecstatic. The plan had worked better than he had ever imagined. That night, he and Sidious celebrated their victory. Plagueis got intoxicated on rare wine and his own success. He had lived to see the grand plan fulfilled. Now he and Sidious would reveal themselves and rule openly. But Sidious had been waiting for this exact moment. With political power secured and Plagueis vulnerable, he made his move. As Plagueis slept off his celebration, confident in his apprentice's loyalty, Sidious struck. The details remain mysterious, but the result was clear. Darth Plagueis, the Sith Lord who thought he had conquered mortality, met his end at the hands of his own apprentice. It was the rule of two playing out exactly as Bane had intended. The apprentice had grown stronger than the master and taken power for himself. Plagueis's dreams of eternal partnership were just that, dreams. Sidious had never intended to share power with anyone. He had played the loyal apprentice for decades, all while planning this betrayal. With Plagueis gone, Sidious stood alone as the Dark Lord of the Sith. But he wasn't quite alone. He still had Darth Maul, his trained assassin, ready to be unleashed on the Jedi. And the time for hiding was about to end. The Naboo crisis that had elevated Palpatine to Chancellor also provided the perfect opportunity to test the Jedi. Sidious sent Maul to Naboo with orders to reveal himself. For 1,000 years, the Sith had hidden. Now, one would step into the light and announce their return through combat. Maul confronted Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi on Naboo. The duel was fierce and shocking. The Jedi hadn't faced a Sith warrior in centuries and were unprepared for Maul's savage fighting style. Qui-Gon fell in battle, becoming the first Jedi in a millennium to perish at Sith hands. Though Obi-Wan managed to defeat Maul, cutting him in half in their final exchange, the damage was done. The Jedi Council was stunned. Master Yoda spoke the words that chilled them all. Always two there are, no more, no less. A master and an apprentice. If Maul was one Sith, where was the other? Was Maul the master or the apprentice? The Jedi had no answers, only questions. Meanwhile, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine expressed appropriate shock and concern at learning the Sith had returned. He promised to support the Jedi in hunting down this threat to peace and justice. Nobody suspected that the concerned Chancellor and the hidden Sith Master were the same person. Sidious had achieved something remarkable. He had eliminated his master, secured political control of the Republic, and announced the Sith's return while keeping his own identity completely hidden. The Jedi knew the Sith were back, but had no idea they were taking orders from one. The rule of two had brought the Sith from near extinction to the height of power. Bane's vision was almost complete. All that remained was the final destruction of the Jedi Order and the transformation of the Republic into something the Sith could rule openly. Sidious began looking for a new apprentice to replace Maul. The rule of two demanded it, and besides, he would need help for the wars to come. The perfect candidate was already being watched, already being evaluated. Someone with more potential than Maul could ever have possessed. The endgame was beginning. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine had a problem. The Republic was too stable, the Jedi were too powerful, and democracy had too many safeguards. If the Sith were going to rule, he needed to tear it all down while looking like he was trying to save it. His solution was brilliant and horrible. He would start a war where he controlled both sides. First, Sidious needed a new apprentice to replace Maul. He found the perfect candidate in Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master who had become disillusioned with the Order. Dooku had left the Jedi voluntarily, troubled by what he saw as their blind loyalty to a corrupt Republic. Sidious approached him with the truth about the Republic's failures and the promise of power to fix things. Dooku embraced the dark side and became Darth Tyrannus. With Tyrannus as his public face, Sidious began building a separatist movement. Thousands of star systems were frustrated with the Republic's corruption and inefficiency. Tyrannus, using his public identity as Count Dooku, became their leader. He promised them independence, freedom from Republic taxation, and a new government that would actually listen to their concerns. Meanwhile, as Chancellor Palpatine, Sidious was playing the other side. He acted concerned about the separatist threat, warning the Senate that the Republic needed to be ready for potential conflict. When a clone army was conveniently discovered on Kamino, supposedly ordered years earlier by a Jedi who had since passed away, Palpatine reluctantly accepted it as the Republic's new military force. Think about how insane this was. Sidious had arranged for both armies. He controlled the separatist droid forces through Dooku, and he commanded the Republic's clone army as Chancellor. Every battle, every strategy, every victory and defeat was ultimately decided by one man playing the galaxy against itself. The Clone Wars erupted in 22 BBY and immediately changed everything. The peaceful Republic became a military state. The Jedi, who had been peacekeepers for 1,000 years, became generals leading clone soldiers into battle. And Chancellor Palpatine kept getting emergency powers to deal with the crisis, powers that he promised to return once the war was over. The war was perfectly designed to destroy the Jedi from within. Every battle forced them to compromise their principles. They had to make decisions that cost lives, form attachments to their clone troops, and embrace violence as a solution. The dark side grew stronger with every conflict, fed by the suffering and hatred of trillions of beings across the galaxy. During this chaos, the rule of two started to bend in ways Bane never intended. Count Dooku, despite being the apprentice, began training his own follower. Her name was Asajj Ventress, a deadly assassin who Dooku called his apprentice. He trained her in dark side techniques and used her for missions too dangerous or beneath a Sith Lord. This was walking a thin line. Ventress wasn't given the Darth title, so technically she wasn't a real Sith. But she was clearly more than just an assassin. Dooku was grooming her to help him eventually overthrow Sidious. It was the same game Sidious had played with Maul while Plagueis was alive. When Ventress grew too powerful, Sidious sensed the threat. He contacted Dooku, and gave him an ultimatum. Prove your loyalty by eliminating Ventress. Dooku, caught between his master and his plans, chose survival. He betrayed Ventress, trying to end her life during a mission. She survived but was cast out, no longer part of the Sith hierarchy. Ventress wanted revenge. She found Savage Opress, a powerful warrior who happened to be Darth Maul's brother. She trained him and then tricked him into becoming Dooku's new apprentice, planning to use him to destroy Dooku. The plan failed spectacularly. Savage was strong but uncontrolled, and Dooku saw through the deception. Ventress's scheme collapsed, leaving Savage alone and purposeless. Then something nobody expected happened. Darth Maul returned from the dead. Everyone thought Obi-Wan had ended Maul on Naboo when he cut him in half. But Maul's hatred had kept him alive. He'd survived on a junk planet, his mind broken, his lower body replaced with mechanical legs made from garbage. When Savage found him and restored his sanity, Maul came back with a vengeance. Maul declared himself the true Dark Lord of the Sith. He took Savage as his apprentice, creating a rival Sith pair. This was a direct challenge to the rule of two. There couldn't be two sets of Sith. The whole system would collapse into the old chaos if multiple Sith lineages existed. Sidious couldn't allow this. In 19 BBY, he personally confronted the brothers. The fight that followed showed why Sidious was the master and everyone else was playing for second place. Despite facing both Maul and Savage together, Sidious dominated them. He ended Savage's life with his lightsaber and beat Maul into submission without breaking a sweat. Interestingly, Sidious didn't eliminate Maul immediately. He had other plans for his former assassin, but by removing Savage, he had restored the rule of two. The pretender apprentice was gone, and the rival Sith lineage was ended. By this point, the Clone Wars had served their purpose. The Jedi were scattered across the galaxy, exhausted from 3 years of constant warfare. The Republic had been transformed into a military dictatorship in all but name, and Sidious had identified his next apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One himself. The final pieces fell into place in 19 BY. Sidious arranged his own kidnapping by separatist forces, knowing that Anakin and Obi-Wan would come to rescue him. During the rescue, Anakin faced Count Dooku in combat. When Anakin defeated him, Palpatine urged the young Jedi to execute the disarmed Count. Dooku's last moments were filled with horrible realization. His master had used him to start a war, to weaken the Jedi, and now was discarding him for a younger, more powerful apprentice. The rule of two demanded that masters use their apprentices until someone better came along. Dooku had served his purpose and was no longer needed. With Dooku gone, Sidious focused on corrupting Anakin. He played on the young Jedi's fears, his attachments, his frustration with the Jedi Council. When the Jedi finally realized Palpatine was the Sith Lord they'd been searching for, it was too late. Anakin chose Sidious over the Jedi, believing the Sith Lord could save his wife from dying. Then came Order 66. With 3 words, Sidious activated the clone troopers' hidden programming. Across the galaxy, clones turned on their Jedi generals without warning. Hundreds of Jedi fell in minutes, shot down by the soldiers they had trusted and led for 3 years. The Jedi Temple burned. Younglings perished. The order that had stood for thousands of years was virtually wiped out in a single day. Palpatine declared himself emperor, transforming the Republic into the First Galactic Empire. He took Anakin, now scarred and rebuilt, as more machine than man after his duel with Obi-Wan as his new apprentice. Darth Vader was born from Anakin's ashes. The grand plan was complete. The Sith ruled the galaxy openly. The Jedi were all but extinct. Democracy had been destroyed from within. Everything Darth Bane had envisioned 1,000 years ago had come to pass. The rule of two had achieved its purpose. Starting from just two Sith hiding in shadows, it had produced an empire that spanned the galaxy. Sidious sat on his throne with Vader as his enforcer, and it seemed like nothing could stop them. But success brought new questions. With the Jedi gone and the Sith victorious, was the rule of two still necessary? Should there only be two Sith when they controlled billions of soldiers and thousands of star systems? Sidious began to experiment with new approaches, training Inquisitors and other dark side users who weren't full Sith. The rule had brought them victory, but victory might require new rules. The Sith had won. After 1,000 years of hiding, planning, and waiting, they ruled the galaxy openly. Emperor Palpatine sat on his throne with Darth Vader as his iron fist. The Jedi were gone. Democracy was dead. The rule of two had achieved everything Darth Bane had envisioned. From 19 BBY to 4 ABY, the Empire dominated every aspect of galactic life. Star destroyers enforced imperial law across thousands of systems. Stormtroopers marched through the streets of countless worlds. And at the top of this massive pyramid of power sat just two beings, Darth Sidious and Darth Vader, master and apprentice, exactly as the rule of two demanded. But ruling was different from conquering. The Sith had spent so long focused on destroying the Jedi that they hadn't really planned for what came next. Should they still limit themselves to just two when they commanded billions? Was the rule of two even necessary anymore? Sidious found creative ways to bend the rules without breaking them. He created the Inquisitorius, a group of dark side users who hunted down surviving Jedi. These Inquisitors were powerful and dangerous, but they weren't Sith. They didn't get the Darth title, weren't taught the deepest Sith secrets, and were kept deliberately weaker than either Sidious or Vader. The Emperor also had his hands, elite agents like Mara Jade who carried out his most sensitive missions. Again, they used the dark side, but they weren't Sith. They were tools, weapons, extensions of the Emperor's will, but never potential successors. In Sidious's mind, this didn't violate the rule of two. There were still only two actual Sith Lords. Everyone else was just hired help. It was like saying a carpenter with many tools still only had two hands. The tools didn't count as extra carpenters. Vader commanded these dark side servants too, particularly the Inquisitors who reported directly to him. But while he used them for missions, he never forgot what they really were: potential threats. Any Force user who wasn't under complete control could become dangerous. The galaxy's history was littered with examples of servants becoming masters. Behind his mask, Vader nursed his own ambitions. The rule of two said the apprentice should eventually challenge the master. But Vader faced a unique problem. His body had been devastated on Mustafar when Obi-Wan defeated him. His mechanical limbs and life support systems kept him alive but limited his potential. In a direct confrontation with Sidious, he would likely lose. So Vader got creative. Around 5 BBY, he discovered a young Force user with incredible raw power. The boy's name was Galen Marek, but Vader gave him the codename Starkiller. In complete secrecy, Vader began training Starkiller as his own apprentice. This was a direct violation of the rule of two. There were already two Sith, so training a third broke Bane's fundamental law. But Vader justified it the same way Sidious had once justified training Maul while Plagueis lived. Starkiller wasn't meant to be a true Sith successor. He was a weapon, specifically designed to help Vader overthrow Sidious. For years, Vader kept Starkiller hidden from the Emperor. He sent his secret apprentice on dangerous missions, eliminating threats to the Empire and hunting down Jedi survivors. All the while, Vader was preparing Starkiller for the day they would challenge Sidious together. The plan seemed perfect until it wasn't. Through his missions, Starkiller encountered fugitive Jedi and rebellious senators. These contacts slowly awakened something in him that Vader hadn't anticipated: compassion. The weapon Vader had forged began to develop a conscience. In 2 BBY, everything came to a head. Starkiller learned he had been manipulated and used by Vader. Instead of helping overthrow the Emperor to rule beside Vader, Starkiller chose to sacrifice himself to save the leaders of what would become the Rebel Alliance. His final battle against Palpatine gave the rebels time to escape and inspired them to formally organize their resistance. Vader's secret was exposed, and Sidious was not pleased. The Emperor had known about Starkiller longer than Vader realized, watching to see if his apprentice's betrayal would be worth cultivating or crushing. In the end, Sidious almost turned Starkiller against Vader, showing how the Master always stayed 3 steps ahead. Desperate to salvage something from his failed plan, Vader tried cloning Starkiller. If he couldn't have the original, maybe a copy would serve. These experiments produced mixed results at best, creating unstable clones that were shadows of the original. It was another violation of the rule of two, another sign that even in victory, the Sith couldn't help but scheme against each other. This constant tension defined the Imperial era. Sidious never fully trusted Vader, always watching for signs of betrayal. He would test Vader's loyalty with impossible missions or deliberate provocations. When Vader recruited agents like Dr. Aphra for his personal missions, Sidious would remind him sharply who was master and who was servant. Vader, for his part, never stopped looking for ways to overthrow Sidious. Every mission was evaluated for how it might help him gain power. Every new Force user discovered was assessed as a potential ally or tool. The rule of two's dynamic of one to embody power and one to crave it played out every single day. Things became even more complicated when both Sith learned about Luke Skywalker. The son of Anakin Skywalker, hidden away after his birth, had grown strong in the Force. Here was someone with the potential to be more powerful than either of them, carrying the bloodline of the Chosen One. Sidious saw Luke as the perfect replacement for Vader. Younger, undamaged, with unlimited potential, Luke could become the apprentice Sidious had always wanted. The fact that turning Luke would cause Vader unimaginable pain was just a bonus. Vader had different plans. He imagined turning Luke to the dark side and using him to overthrow the Emperor. Father and son would rule the galaxy together, establishing a new dynasty. It was the same dream of breaking the rule of two that so many Sith before him had harbored. As the rebellion grew stronger, spreading from a handful of cells to a genuine galactic threat, Both Sith became obsessed with Luke Skywalker. He represented the future of the Sith Order, one way or another. Either he would join them and perpetuate the rule of two, or his resistance would force a final confrontation. The Emperor began laying traps to capture Luke, each one also serving as a test of Vader's loyalty. Would Vader help turn his son into a tool of the Emperor, or would his paternal feelings create an opening for betrayal? Every move in this game had multiple purposes, multiple outcomes being tested simultaneously. By 4 ABY, as the rebellion prepared for what would become the Battle of Endor, the stage was set for the Rule of Two's ultimate test. 3 Force users would enter the throne room aboard the second Death Star. Only one would leave as the Dark Lord of the Sith. The Rule of Two had brought the Sith from extinction to dominance. It had kept them focused and strong while their enemies grew weak. But it had also ensured that even in victory, the Sith could never truly trust each other. Every master feared their apprentice. Every apprentice plotted against their master. Bane had designed it this way on purpose. The constant conflict was supposed to make the Sith stronger. But as Emperor and Enforcer circled each other like hungry predators, both eyeing Luke Skywalker as the key to their plans, the question remained. Would the Rule of Two be the Sith's greatest strength or their fatal weakness? The answer would come at Endor, where a father's love would clash with a millennium of Sith tradition. The Battle of Endor in 4 ABY was supposed to be the Rebel Alliance's desperate last stand. Instead, it became the grave of the Sith Order that had ruled for 1,000 years. Emperor Palpatine had laid the perfect trap. He leaked information about the second Death Star being unfinished and vulnerable. He let the rebels know he would be there personally overseeing construction. Every piece of bait was carefully placed to draw the Alliance into one final battle where he could crush them completely. But the real trap wasn't for the rebel fleet. It was for Luke Skywalker. Sidious knew Luke would come. The boy was too noble, too eager to redeem his father to resist the opportunity. And once Luke was aboard the Death Star, Sidious would make him an offer he couldn't refuse. Turn to the dark side and save his friends, or watch them all perish. Luke walked into the throne room exactly as planned. Vader brought his son before the Emperor like a prize, though anyone watching closely could see the tension in the Dark Lord's mechanical breathing. This meeting would determine the future of the Sith Order, and all 3 Force users in that room knew it. Sidious had orchestrated everything perfectly. Outside the throne room's massive windows, the rebel fleet was being torn apart. The Death Star's super laser, which the rebels thought was non-operational, picked off their ships one by one. Luke watched his friends dying and felt his anger rising. The Emperor goaded him relentlessly. When Luke finally ignited his lightsaber, Vader blocked him. Father and son began their duel while Sidious watched from his throne, savoring every moment. This was the Rule of Two at its purest. The strong would survive, the weak would fall, and he would claim the victor as his apprentice. The duel was everything Sidious had hoped for. Luke fought with increasing aggression, tapping into his anger as his friends died outside. Vader seemed almost reluctant, defensive rather than aggressive, as if he didn't really want to fight his son. But as the battle intensified, both combatants unleashed their full power. When Vader mentioned turning Luke's sister Leia to the dark side, something snapped in Luke. He attacked with pure fury, driving Vader back with savage strikes. The elder Skywalker fell, his hand severed completely at Luke's mercy. This was the moment. Sidious leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with triumph. Luke stood over his defeated father, lightsaber raised for the final blow. The Emperor's voice dripped with satisfaction as he commanded Luke to fulfill his destiny. "End your father and take his place at my side." But Luke looked at Vader's severed mechanical hand, then at his own prosthetic hand, and understood the trap. If he struck down his father in anger, he would become the very thing he fought against. He would be the new Vader, the Emperor's slave, trapped in the same cycle of hatred and betrayal. Luke threw away his lightsaber. He faced the Emperor unarmed and declared himself a Jedi, like his father before him. He would not turn. He would not continue the rule of two. Sidious's triumph turned to rage. If Luke wouldn't turn, then he would suffer. Lightning erupted from the Emperor's fingers, coursing through Luke's body. The young Jedi writhed in agony, his screams filling the throne room. Sidious poured all his hatred and power into destroying this boy who had rejected the dark side. Vader struggled to his feet, watching his son being tortured to the point of expiration. And in that moment, something long buried stirred within the machine that had been Darth Vader. Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi who had loved so deeply it had destroyed him, awakened. The rule of two demanded that Vader watch, wait, and then claim power for himself. Sith tradition said he should let Luke perish and remain the Emperor's servant, or help the Emperor and find a new path to power. Everything about the Sith way pointed to self-preservation and ambition. But Anakin Skywalker wasn't thinking about the Sith. He was thinking about his son. In one motion, Vader grabbed the Emperor from behind. Sidious's lightning reflected off Vader's armor, shorting out his life support systems. The Emperor's shock turned to disbelief as his own apprentice lifted him high. This wasn't supposed to happen. This violated everything the Sith believed. Vader carried Sidious to the reactor shaft and threw him in. The Emperor fell, his body disintegrating in the reactor's energy field. The most powerful Sith Lord in history was gone, destroyed not by ambition or betrayal, but by a father's love for his son. The effort destroyed Vader as well. His life support systems were failing, damaged beyond repair by the Emperor's lightning. As Luke dragged him toward a shuttle, Vader knew he had only moments left. He asked Luke to remove his mask, to let him look at his son with his own eyes one last time. Anakin Skywalker passed away moments later, but not as a Sith Lord. He had returned to the light in his final act, choosing love over power, sacrifice over survival. The prophecy of the Chosen One was fulfilled. He had brought balance to the Force by destroying the Sith, including himself. With both Sidious and Vader gone, the Sith Order that had begun with Darth Bane simply ceased to exist. There was no master left to teach, no apprentice left to learn. The rule of two had no one left to continue it. 1,000 years of careful planning, patient waiting, and calculated betrayal ended in a single moment of compassion. The Galactic Empire began falling apart almost immediately. Without Palpatine's will holding it together, the Imperial military fractured into competing factions. Star systems declared independence. The careful order the Sith had imposed through fear and strength crumbled into chaos. Luke Skywalker stood as possibly the last Force user in the galaxy trained in lightsaber combat. But he was a Jedi, not a Sith. The dark knowledge that had been passed from master to apprentice for 30 generations was gone. The rule of two was broken, this time seemingly forever. The irony was perfect and terrible. The rule of two had been designed to prevent the Sith from destroying themselves through infighting. It had worked perfectly for a millennium, keeping the Sith focused and strong while they worked toward their revenge. It had brought them from near extinction to absolute dominance. But the very thing that made it strong also made it vulnerable. By limiting the Sith to only 2 members, Bane had ensured that losing both meant losing everything. There were no backup plans, no hidden enclaves of additional Sith, no way to recover from total loss. The rule of two was all or nothing. And at Endor, it became nothing. The Jedi had thought they destroyed the Sith at Ruusan, only to be wrong. Now the Alliance thought they had destroyed the Sith at Endor. Were they right this time? Or would the dark side find new servants, new inheritors of the Sith legacy? The immediate answer seemed to be yes, the Sith were truly gone. But Sith teaching still existed in hidden holocrons. Dark side cults still operated in secret corners of the galaxy. And the ambition and hatred that had always fueled the Sith remained part of sentient nature. The rule of two, as Darth Bane had envisioned it, was dead. But the story of those who would try to revive or replace it was just beginning. After Endor, the galaxy thought the Sith were finally extinct. They were wrong again. Lumiya, whose real name was Shira Bree, had been one of Emperor Palpatine's hands and secretly trained by Vader himself. She wasn't a full Sith Lord when the Empire fell, but she knew enough. More importantly, she believed in the rule of two. While the New Republic celebrated and Luke Skywalker began rebuilding the Jedi Order, Lumiya declared herself Dark Lady of the Sith and went to work. She understood that the rule of two wasn't just about limiting numbers. It was about focus, secrecy, and patience. The Sith had revealed themselves too early under Palpatine. They had gotten overconfident. Lumiya would not make the same mistake. Operating from the shadows, she began taking apprentices one at a time, trying to rebuild the Sith lineage. Her first was Flint, a former rebel who had turned to the dark side. When he failed to meet her expectations and was captured, she moved on to Karna Jax, an Imperial Royal Guard with ambitions of his own. He showed promise, but fell in battle before he could truly become Sith. Lumiya's greatest success came decades later when she set her sights on someone special. Jacen Solo, son of Han Solo, and Leia Organa, grandson of Darth Vader himself. Here was someone with incredible Force potential and a legacy tied directly to the Sith. Through careful manipulation, playing on his fears about the galaxy's future and his desire to protect those he loved, Lumiya turned Jacen to the dark side. Around 40 ABY in the Star Wars Legends timeline, Jacen Solo became Darth Sidious. For the first time since Endor, a true Sith Lord walked the galaxy, trained in the rule of two tradition. Lumiya had succeeded where others had failed. The rule of two lived again. Sidious tried to impose order on the galaxy through the Galactic Alliance, believing that only through Sith control could peace be achieved. It was the same justification his grandfather had used, the same trap of thinking that tyranny could create stability. He even took his own apprentice, Tahiri Veila, a former Jedi who had fallen to darkness. But the Solo family wasn't going to let history repeat itself. In 41 ABY, during what became known as the Second Galactic Civil War, Jaina Solo confronted her twin brother in single combat. The duel between siblings ended with Caedus falling to Jaina's blade. His apprentice Tahiri was redeemed before she could become truly Sith. Lumia herself had already perished by then, struck down by Luke Skywalker, who blamed her for the loss of his wife, Mara Jade. With both Lumia and Caedus gone, the rule of two was dead once more. Every traceable line from Darth Bane through Sidious to Lumia had been severed. The galaxy had about 90 years of peace from the rule of two. Then everything changed with Darth Krayt. Krayt had been a Jedi during the Clone Wars era who survived Order 66 and later fell to the dark side. He spent decades studying Sith lore, but he came to a radical conclusion. The rule of two was obsolete. It had served its purpose by bringing the Sith to power, but it had also caused their downfall. Two Sith were too vulnerable, too easy to eliminate completely. In 130 ABY, Krayt established the one Sith on the ancient Sith world of Korriban. His philosophy was the complete opposite of Bane's. Instead of two Sith, there would be many. Instead of hiding, they would build armies. Instead of master and apprentice destroying each other, all Sith would serve one vision. Krayt's vision. He called it the Rule of One. The one Sith grew to include dozens of members. They had their own academy, their own hierarchy, their own fleet. Under Krayt's leadership, they actually conquered the galaxy for a time, establishing a new Sith empire. It seemed like Krayt had been right and Bane had been wrong. But when Krayt tried to consult the ancient Sith holocrons for wisdom, he got an unpleasant surprise. The holocron of Darth Bane activated, and Bane's spirit appeared to condemn Krayt as a heretic. Bane warned that abandoning the rule of two would doom the Sith to repeat their ancient mistakes. Many weak Sith would drag down the strong. Infighting would return. The Order would destroy itself from within. Krayt dismissed these warnings as the bitter words of a failed system. But Bane's prophecy proved accurate. The one Sith began to fracture. Power struggles emerged. When Krayt temporarily fell, his followers fought among themselves for control. Even after Krayt returned, the unity he had promised never fully materialized. In 138 ABY, after Krayt's final defeat, a lone Sith named Darth Red decided that Bane had been right all along. Red began systematically hunting down and eliminating the surviving one Sith members. His goal was simple and brutal: reduce the Sith back to two. One master, one apprentice, as Bane had intended. Red succeeded in eliminating most of the one Sith leadership, effectively destroying Krayt's order. He tried to recruit a worthy apprentice to restart the rule of two properly. But before he could establish a new lineage, Red met his end in battle against Anya Solo, a descendant of Han and Leia. It was fitting that another Solo ended another attempt to revive the Sith. The Skywalker and Solo bloodlines seemed destined to stand against the rule of two whenever it emerged. With Red's demise, the Sith appeared to be extinct once more. Some Imperial Knights suspected that a few one Sith members like Darth Talon might have survived in hiding. But no new Sith Order emerged. The rule of two, which had defined the Sith for over a millennium, seemed to have finally run its course. Looking back at the complete history in Star Wars Legends, the rule of two was both the Sith's greatest success and their ultimate failure. It took them from near extinction to galactic dominance. It kept them focused and strong while their enemies grew complacent. It produced some of the most powerful Force users in history. But it also ensured that the Sith could never truly win. The constant betrayal meant they could never trust each other. The limitation to two members meant that one bad day could end everything. The very mechanism that made them strong also guaranteed their downfall. Darth Bane created the rule of two to save the Sith from themselves. For 1,000 years, it worked exactly as designed. The apprentice would grow stronger and overthrow the master, ensuring that each generation surpassed the last. This cycle of betrayal and growth brought the Sith from hiding to ruling the galaxy. But Bane never accounted for love. He never imagined that a Sith Lord would choose his son over power, that Darth Vader would destroy both himself and his master to save Luke Skywalker. The rule of two assumed that Sith would always choose ambition over emotion, strength over sacrifice. That single moment of compassion at Endor shattered everything. The rule of two couldn't survive when one of the two chose love over power, and every attempt to revive it afterward failed, whether through Lumiya's traditional approach or Red's violent reformation. Perhaps that's the ultimate legacy of the rule of two. It proved that power gained through betrayal and hatred carries the seeds of its own destruction. It showed that systems built on mistrust cannot endure forever. And it demonstrated that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from the dark side's passion, but from the simple love of a father for his son. The rule of two made the Sith powerful enough to conquer the galaxy. But it also made them vulnerable enough to lose everything in a single act of redemption. Darth Bane would probably call that failure. Others might call it justice. In the end, the rule of two achieved exactly what it was designed to do. It made the Sith strong enough to destroy the Jedi and rule the galaxy. The fact that it also destroyed the Sith themselves, that's the price of building an empire on betrayal. The apprentice always betrays the master, even when that betrayal comes from love instead of ambition. The rule of two died as it lived, through betrayal, just not the kind Bane expected.